remember once hearing from an Adam Gadol who was asked personal advice whether or not the Ingeman that was in Kairo should invest his dowry with another individual who took money from people and invested it. And the Rosh Hashiva wasn't very happy about the situation. He didn't want to say yes or no, however. First, he wanted to discuss the issue with this young man who wanted to invest the money. And at one point, the young man said, but this is a sure win. It has to make money. And I've spoken to so many people, they say there is no way this business can possibly lose. And the Shiva suddenly stopped and he said, definitely stay away from it. And the young man was a little bit perplexed. What did he say over here that made the Rosh Hashiva decide, at least until now? He was weighing the options. And the Rosh Hashiva explained to him, at the point that you've expressed yourself this way, that it's a sure win, that there's no way it can lose, then stay away from it. In other words, if you're telling me this is the possible gain, these are the risks, and you have a certain amount of risk tolerance, and you're willing to take a certain amount of chance, fine. Then at least I was weighing the options. But from a sure thing, run away from. Well, the young man wasn't quite sure. He knew what the Rosh Hashiva meant, at least not right then and there. But he did adhere to his advice, and he stayed away from it. And later on, he did not regret it, because the sure thing became a sure loss. And the advice that he got as a Mordecai Yesod in life, the Yesod is stay away from sure wins, because they don't exist. At the point that you're about to entertain an idea and you evaluate the circumstances and you've accepted the possibilities of gain as opposed to risk, and you acknowledge that there is risk, then maybe. Then maybe. But at the point that there's no way to lose, then run like from the plague, because that doesn't exist down here in this world. And here we come to a Mordecai Kli Yakar in this week's Pasha. As you know, in this week's Pasha, in Pasha's Bahar, we have the issue of ribis, lending or borrowing money on interest. And I'm sure, as you also know, that while lending or borrowing money on interest is forbidden, it is permitted to engage in partnerships that either will be successful or the lack of such. And sometimes it is difficult to draw the line between what constitutes ribis, a loan for interest, as opposed to a joint business investment. Now, I don't want to oversimplify this. It's an extremely complex issue. That's the basis of a heter iska. But in very general terms, this is the basic idea. If you stand to lose as well as gaining, then it's viewed as a business partnership. If you can only gain and you can't lose, then it's a loan. And a loan that you charge for violates the Yisur. So if I'm going to invest $1,000 with Reuven, and Reuven makes it clear to me, if I make money, you make a percentage. If I lose money, you don't make a percentage. That's okay. If, however, my arrangement with Reuven is, I don't really care what you do with this $1,000. As long as you give me back $1,100, you can take this $1,000, then it becomes ribis. Now, Lamaisa, of course, you have to talk to a Rav before anything is done. The issues are far more complex, but that's the basic idea. Schacter Kli Yakar. Do you know what's wrong with ribis? It's a sure thing. This situation in life, where I'm investing money and I can't lose, I have to gain, the Torah doesn't want this. You are totally removing the midas habitachon from the person. Every person engaged in business, Schacter Kli Yakar, Tichol Baal Masa Umatan, Ein of Nesuas El Hashem. He knows he has to come on to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Because there's a degree of suffix. He's Mesutik in your Viach de Mischara Elav. You make an investment, you open a new store, you decide to expand, you decide to hire more workers, you decide to invest in new machinery. So you know, it may pay back tenfold, or it may not. You may lose. And basically, your Shemoneh Esrei that morning that you're going to write out this check should be a different kind of Shemoneh Esrei. You have to come on to the Rebbeinu Shalom. If there's an element of suffix, then it falls under the realms of Kiddushas HaTorah. But at the point that someone loans money, with an absolute agreement that whether or not the recipient of this money makes money or doesn't, I gain, and you're totally removing yourself from B'tachan and Hashem Yisbarach, then it's not das Torah. Then it's wrong. Then this is not the kind of money that's going to fall into the infrastructure of what makes for an Eruch Yid. On the contrary, it is detrimental. It's a poison in a person's financial portfolio. Chazal say, someone who loans money on ribbis nechasav nismaited. It's self-destructive. And that is why the parsha of ribbis comes always together with the parsha of Shemitah. That every 7 years we stop and we leave our fields for a year. It's the same idea. At one point you have to stop and say, the ultimate bracha comes only from the Rebbeinu Shalom. True, the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to engage in inyanim of parnasa, and the Rebbeinu Shalom has various different shluchim, but ultimately it comes directly from Hashem. And if you don't leave go of your vehicle of parnasa every once in a while and say, I am not going to indulge in it, then you forget that. I'm sure you all know the famous story of the Moshav Kananias in Eretz Yisrael under the guidance of Mendelssohn Zechayim Levracha. And Ish Kaddish Adniyai, the Chazaynish, said that he's the Paisik in Zroyim in Eretz Yisrael. And he was like from the first of the Rabbanim that would oversee in agricultural settlement, the Talmudic agricultural settlement, and he heralded the union of Shemitah, that once again it should be adhered to. Now, Baruch Hashem, it is a massive movement in Eretz Yisrael, but he was the first in Kananiyah. And this was a time that people were struggling for existence, food was scarce, eggs were rationed. We're talking about an era where a tourist got 3 eggs a week in order to make it look good. And here this rabbi comes with an idea of, for an entire year, not to plant, just to leave the field hefker, for the farmers to roll into Cairo. There was much scorn, there was much criticism, especially from the neighboring kibbutzim. I'm sure you're well aware of. And interestingly enough, at Baruch Hashem had the opportunity this year of hearing the story from an older resident of Kananias. There was a terrible locust plague that year, that first Shemitah year in Eretz Yisrael. The locust wiped everything out in that whole area. And this Yid was describing to me how they were sitting before the radio, the farmer, and they were sittering. And you heard on the radio like a weather forecast as they were tracking the locusts, and they were saying, oh no, the locusts have entered this moshav and that moshav, there will be nothing left. Well, they entered all the agricultural settlements of that entire area, wiping everything out except for Kananias. And there were even certain border disputes between this moshav and a neighboring moshav, and the locusts, as the Midrashim tell us happened in Mitzrayim, clearly laid down the line. You saw exactly where they went and where they didn't go. But this Yid added another interesting point to the story. He said there were 2 farms in Kananias that the locusts did enter. I'm not sure if he said that they entered but they didn't consume as much, but there was some type of infiltration in those farms in Kananias, the only 2 farms. And supposedly these farmers also adhere to the laws of Shemitah. So they went to discuss with the farmers, Lamaisa, did you people cheat? And these 2 farmers admitted that they would open up their irrigation sprinklers and no one was looking. And at the end, the people from the other settlements had to come to Kananias to buy food. The aside is, when a Yid engages in Parnasa, and whatever the Metzaya is, whatever the Isser is, whatever the problem is, but he goes only so far and says, I am not going to turn the page, because expanding at this point, reinvesting at this point, suggests a possible Isser, whether the Isser can be Chil Shabbos, whether the Isser relates to Shemitah, whether the Isser relates to Ribbis. It doesn't make a difference. But the point is, the Yid says, I'm going to go so far and not any further because the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't want me to do it. Because I'll be too far away from my children. Because living in that place won't be good for the chinuch of my children. Whatever the case may be. So it's not that you could have had 100% business, instead you only have 80%. You gave up 20% because of your Yiddishkeit. That's the wrong way to look at it. The right way to look at this situation is that you're acknowledging that the 80% that you have comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. By stepping into the other 20%, even though it violates tenets of Yiddishkeit, You're not just playing with your 20%. What you're doing is you're disclaiming 100% of the business from B'Rabbi Shalom. The Imri Emes explains this in his writings, and it's a tremendous yesod. The Torah promises an extra bracha for those who adhere to the laws of Shemitah. Where does that bracha manifest itself? It manifests itself in the 6 years that you do work. Because by abstaining from work on Shemitah, you are testifying that you believe during the other 6 years, whatever bracha takes effect comes from the B'Rabbi Shalom. If not, why in the world would you stop during the 7th year? By not working on Shabbos, you bring a bracha into the rest of the week. The fact that you could work on Shabbos and don't, because the B'Rabbi Shalom says not to, impresses your emunah that during the 6 weeks that you do work, whatever comes in comes from the B'Rabbi Shalom. There's a famous marshal, they say, from the Altus in the Vardik, that the old blacksmith once said, I've been working all these years. When I was a young boy, my father taught me to become a blacksmith. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Can you imagine what would have happened if my father would have taught me to become a goldsmith? So people said to him, what's wrong? Goldsmiths make nice money. So he answered, you don't understand. He said, I'm sitting over here with my anvil, with my fire, with my nettle for 50 years. And not once did a person ever come in and give me a piece of gold to fix. I would have starved. So go explain to him, the Altif and the Vardik says, of course no one came in with a piece of gold, because no one brings gold to a blacksmith. If you would have been a goldsmith, no one would have ever come in with a piece of horseshoe for you to fix. The nimshal being, you have people that pursue certain careers in life, and then they look back and they say, Baruch Hashem, that I did this. If I didn't do it, I wouldn't have had panos. How would I have survived? I would have stayed in Koil for a year or two after I got married. Or a person says, how would I have survived? How would my children been able to support themselves if I didn't insist that they leave yeshiva and go to school at an early age? Look, now they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're dentists. Suck the Altus and the Vardik. You're right. If you didn't send him at that early age to pursue the career that you directed him at, he wouldn't be making his parnasa through that career. But to assume that because that he wouldn't have parnasa, or to assume that had you not done what you did, had you listened to his Rosh Yeshiva and kept him in Yeshiva for a couple of years longer, had he committed himself to Torah, he wouldn't have survived, then you're making as much sense, says the Altis and the Vardik, as the blacksmith who says no one taka ever brought him gold. Now, the Sifri Musar explained that the amount of ishtadlus a person has to put in to provide for himself is closely linked to the amount of betachan that he has. There is a level which the select few are zaychatu of betachan without ishtadlus. Such faith in Hashem that they virtually do no work. There's the same story my father used to tell me, but the Alshach HaKadosh who came to town and dashin that the person truly had betachan in Hashem, Hashem would provide for him. And there was a water carrier who said, what am I? Am I crazy? Do I schlep this barrel of water every single day for no reason? If you can do the same thing through betachan sounds a lot easier, he told his wife and family. At first they laughed at him, but then they weren't laughing because he gave up his job and he sat down under this medrash to say Tillim. He didn't know how to learn, so all he could do was say Tillim. His wife was sure after a couple of days would give it up and get back to work, but he was determined to wait this out. There was no question in his mind. The Rav said, with betachan you get what you want. Well, to make a long story short, the Arab knocked on the door and asked if he can buy the horse. And she was so desperate because she had no food that she sold the horse to him. And he fooled her and he bought it only for a couple of coins. And that day he went out and found a treasure. And he saw one more diamond and he tried to cut into the root of a tree to be able to get a hold of that diamond, and the tree fell on him. And meanwhile, the horse and the wagon returned to its usual owner, where it was used to coming back at the end of a long day, and there was a big, beautiful treasure, and the man was rich. So the Talmidim came running to the Alshach HaKadosh, and they said, Rebbe, all these years we're working on betachan, and these things never happened to us. Our horses never came back with treasures. And we, well, in a nice way, they said, we're your Talmidim. We can do more than just say Tillim. And he hears one shmooze from you, walks off to the Bismedish. A couple of days later, his horse comes back with a treasure. So the Alshach said to them, why don't you understand? He says, you're too smart. Your bitachon is an avoid on your part, and it reaches certain levels, but it's not complete bitachon. If you sat down to say, Tillam, and said Hashem is going to provide for you, you believe that 80%, 90%, 95%, you believe to a certain degree Hashem will provide for you. By him, there were no questions. He is such a simpleton that when he heard the Rav say, with bitachon Hashem will provide for you, so what was the point of working? He was absolute in his belief. It wasn't 99.9%, it was 100%. If you can reach that madrega, then you'll also be successful. So bitachon without a shtadla seems to be limited to either someone who is so simple that therefore it works in his advantage that he doesn't doubt anything, and then he attack against it. Or someone who is avoided, who is sitkos, overrides his wisdom that says things don't come on their own, and he understands so clearly that everything comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom that he too can be zeicher to bitachon without a shtadla. Famous story of Chaim Volozhina, Father Rocha used to tell me, it's brought down in many svarim, that he would learn in the middle of the night with some Talmidim, and once it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and he asked if anyone has a watch. He wanted to know what time it was, and they were discussing the Indian of bitachon. And one of the Talmidim said for a joke that if we had bitachon, that we would get a watch. We would get a watch, 3 o'clock in the morning. And Chaim Volozhina felt a certain sense of that he was mocking it a little bit. So he slammed down on the table and said, if you had proper bitachon, we would get a gold watch right over here 3 o'clock at night. Several minutes later, there was a commotion outside, and a Jewish soldier came running in with a gold watch on a chain. And he said, Rabbi, please, this is the only thing I have left from home. Watch it for me. My so-called colleagues have stolen everything else I have. So Reb Chaim Volozhina said, no, I can't take it from you. I don't know if I'm going to see you again. I can't take the responsibility. So he said, fine, Rabbi, keep it as a present. I would much rather you have it than my comrades in arms. So Reb Chaim Volozhina gave him a bracha, and the soldier left, and there was the gold watch on his thing. So what are we to say? We don't have the level of tmimus that simple person had. We don't have the bitachon that Reb Chaim Volozhina had. And the answer is, therefore, we have to go out and do a shtadlus. But when we come to crucial decisions, should I travel to that place? I'm going to be away from my family for a long time. No learning with my children at night. Maybe it's not so good for my eyes to be there. Should I take this computer program into my house? It's good for my business. What if my children get a hold of it? Should I engage this business deal that could lead to a possible chilul Hashem? Is there a possible shiloh of ribbis? Is there a possible shiloh of sheker or geneva? When we stop doing these nisyonos in life and we say, Rebbeinu Shalom, I'm not going to do it. Because I know everything comes from you anyhow. And this is our Shemitah. And this is where we bring the bracha to the other 6 years, where we do work. Parshas Bahar begins with the mitzvah of Shemitah and ends with the mitzvah of Shabbos. It begins with Daber Shema Moshe Bahar Sinai Leimar Daber Ol Bnei Yisrael V'yamartu Aleim Ki Savayu Al Haaretz, and you will come to your land Asher Ani Neitu Lachem V'Shavta Haaretz Shabbos Lashem. And the last pasuk in the Sedra is Es Shabsai Tishmaru Migdashi Tirahu Ani Hashem. The connection between Shemitah and Shabbos is obvious. Both are mitzvahs that are here to cause a person a great hefsid. Here we're telling you to take a sabbatical. Don't work your field for an entire year. And here we're telling you close your shop for Shabbos. Don't work on Shabbos. So you would think this would result in a net loss. In both instances, the Torah promises exactly the opposite. In regard to Shemitah, the pasuk promises that Tzizisias Berchasi Lachem Bashana Hashishis. Don't worry, you are not going to lose by being the kinds of mitzvah of Shemitah. And in regard to Shabbos, we are told, from one Rosh Hashanah to the other Rosh Hashanah, budget yourself because you were only allotted a certain amount each Rosh Hashanah besides for what you spend on Shabbos and for your children for Talmud Torah. That's not part of the cheshbon. Over here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, the more you spend, and the more I'll give you. Consider this the Rebbeinu Shalom's expense account. Do it for the business, and Adarav, you'll be rewarded for it. It won't cost you out of your own pocket. Like the Gemara says in Masechtas Beya, Lavu Alai, just borrow on my account, the Kitchu Kedishas Hayayim, and trust me, if I need Pereya, I'll pay you back. The rationale, there is no rationale, except that there is a HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world, who told us how to live, and told us what's going to happen. And therefore, our parsha begins, explains the Chassam Sofer, V'yadav Hashem el Moshe Behar Sinai Leimar, as Rashi asks, all mitzvahs were given
On Har Sinai, ma inyan Shemitah etzel Har Sinai. How come Har Sinai is mentioned over here? Schacter Sam Sefer, because this is the Parsha of Amunah. Har Sinai is the side of our belief in the Rebbeinu Shalom. Amunah is in our hearts through Har Sinai. We were all standing there. And here you have a mitzvah which is totally hefech haseichel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, stop working, and I'm promising you. No one can make this up, because what's going to happen to the promise? Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu can give us this hafsacha. Now, the Meshech Chochmah is a davar pella. Let's continue on this analogy between Shemitah and Shabbos. The Torah commanded us to work the ground 6 consecutive years, and for the ground to rest on Shabbos. In Ma'aseh Bereishis, in the 6 days of Ma'aseh Bereishis, the Torah singled out Tuesday and Friday as days that the word Tov is repeated twice. And that's why those are considered to be good days. People have a minhag that when they move, they try to move either on Tuesday or on Friday. All sorts of different minhagim. Some people send in challah or salt on Friday and they move on Tuesday. Take note, says Rameir Simcha. When do we give Meiser Oni? Now you know that the cycle of Meisers is not the same throughout the 6 years between Shemitahs. During the first year after Shemitah, it's Meiser Rishon, which goes to the Levi, and Meiser Sheni, which is brought to Yerushalayim. The same is true for the second year. It's Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni. On the 3rd year of the Shemitah cycle, it's Meiser Rishon that goes to the Levi, but Meiser Sheni, which is normally brought to Yerushalayim, is replaced with Meiser Oni. So Meiser goes to the poor people. The 3rd year in the Shemitah cycle is Tuesday. Then, you have the 4th year in the Shemitah cycle, Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni. The 5th year in the Shemitah cycle, Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni. The 6th year in the Shemitah cycle, which is equivalent to Erev Shabbos and Sheishis and Bereishis, is again Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani. So in the 2 years that correspond to the 2 days, which is considered Toiv, where there is the potential of extra bracha, the Torah commands us to give tzedakah. The Torah commands us that we are native with the aniyim, and tzedakah, as we also know, opens up the shari bracha for us. Shabbos is supposed to remind us where we are and where we're headed, that this world is as the Mitzvah Yisham says, just a proizdar, just a great corridor, the great hallway, li'olam haba. And don't get too involved in whatever you're doing, regardless of how successful you are, because it is only temporary. The Dubna Maggid is a powerful marshal. You have a poor person that's beginning to make a little bit money, selling little cups, mugs, shoelaces, and he sees that his pennies are beginning to add up. As a matter of fact, every day he has more and more pennies, and every day he shines them, and he proudly counts his pennies, and it gets to a point that he's showing off his piles and piles of pennies to people, and he really feels like $1 million. He feels the world are opening up. He's dreaming already about being rich, about buying houses and ships. And one day along comes a money changer and switches his pennies for dollars. And then he sees how few dollars he has, and suddenly he feels very foolish. He was counting pennies, anticipating how many pennies he was going to make. But when you convert it for something substantial, it sort of became meaningless. And we view our years in this world as if it's going to go on forever. And there's a reason for that, because our neshama is nitzchiyas. But by the same token, we don't really make the proper provisions for the world that actually lasts forever. So the Torah is saying to us, instead of counting days, it's Sefartu l'cha sheva shapsiv shonim, sheva shonim, sheva panim. Make a cheshbon. Make a cheshbon of the mitzvah of Shemitah and the mitzvah of Yovel. By the time you're old enough to count, you're probably, let's say, 10 years old. So think about it. How many Shemitahs and how many mitzvahs of Yovel are you going to have in the average lifetime of 70 years? In the somewhat 60 years that are left? 7 Shemitahs? 1 mitzvah of Yovel? Maybe 2? If you start out with a Yovel year? And suddenly you begin to think about the whole life that is ahead of you, and one begins to wonder, it isn't all that much, is it? So maybe it's time I stop hoarding a currency that has this cutoff date that expires, and I begin to invest in things that are going to last forever. There are 3 parshiyas that begin over here in order as Parshas Bahar moves along. There's the Parsha of Shemitah, afterwards the Parsha of Shechuri Avadim, the command that we have to send away our slaves during Yovel, And then the parsha of Ribbis that warns us not to charge interest. All of these represent the same theme. It's part of the same lesson, but the scene changes. Here are three things that a person relies on. A person sleeps well at night. He says, all of my holdings, I own all of these fields. It's always going to provide for me. I don't have to worry about working. I don't have to worry about being a laborer. My field will take care of me. My business investments will take care of me. Or a person says, look, I have all these people working for me. These avodim, they're committed to me. They owe it to me. I'm paying them. They have no choice. I don't have to worry about a thing. I have a director of operations. I have a foreman. I have a manager. Me, I just sit in the back office and write checks. I'm not cut out for working, and I'll never have to work a day in my life, people think. And then there are those who say, look, I'm getting an excellent return on my money. My money is invested well. People have to pay me. It's their problem. It's the little person's problem, the one who has to pay off the mortgage on his house. It's the person who had to borrow the money on business. They're all giving me a good rate for it. I don't have a thing to worry about. I can walk down the street with my head up, looking from side to side and laughing at everyone else working. These may be extremes, but the general mahalach of how people think, or at least how people sometimes would like to think and dream. And therefore the Torah is addressing all three of these, the Ishbitza says. Your field, come Shemitah, your field is as good as your neighbor's field. It's all one. You have to relinquish all control over your field. And if you don't, there's the warning of Golus, that it will come involuntary. Avodim, you have lots of avodim working for you? Okay, that has its pros and cons. But one thing you have to know, when Yovel comes, they're all free. It's temporary. And self-kosaf, you will face the responsibilities yourself. Money invested, you're not allowed to charge interest from one year to another. The Yishbitza explains, as a tzaddik does often, that everything in this world is divided into three categories: oilam, shana, nefesh. In other words, oilam, place, shana, time, and nefesh, person, the neshama of the individual. The kinyan of sadais and kramim, fields and vineyards, is a kinyan, the oilam, in place. A person thinks, in this world, I have it, I own, I am rich. Hashem commands us to fulfill the mitzvah of Shemitah, to remember we don't own anything in this world. We have no idea what the next day is going to bring. And if we can imprint in our minds that it is temporary, through the mitzvah of Shemitah, then it's not necessary for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to show us how temporary holdings can be. Then you have people who don't rely so much on place, but they rely on time. They say, I have plenty of time to do tshuva. I have plenty of time to still make a lot of money. My business is going to build up. I invested now in these penny stocks, but I know they're going to build up. And we sit back and we sort of rest on the laurels over here. We know time is in our favor. Well, it depends what you do with that. If what you do with that is you're lax in your Torah and mitzvahs and your responsibilities, so the Torah warns us. Ribbis, interest, represents charging a person for time. Kinyan hazman is not a kinyan. There are no guarantees. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be responsible and invest for the future. But by the same token, if you're not interested in Baruch Aleinu, and you feel Harachmanu Yifaneseinu V'chava is not nogeya to you, because after all you're so well invested, and in the course of time you're going to be so rich if you figure out your pension plans and everything else that's going to come through, the Torah warns us. Time is dangerous. Because you and I don't really know what tomorrow is going to bring. Kenega, the third kinyan, which is the kinyan in nefesh, there are those who rely on individuals, on people, and they say, he works for me, that person owes it to me, I have nothing to worry about. That is represented by the Torah commanding us to free the avodim in Yovel. Al tiftachu b'nediv. Another dangerous thing when you rely on another basar v'dam, because human beings are a strange species. Those that you really thought you can rely on sometimes become very unreliable. And it's a danger to put your trust too much into people. One of the reasons that Esther summoned Haman to the Suda was she was concerned that the people aren't going to be in the spal quite with the right kavana and urgency. They're going to say, we have a sister in the palace. What do we have to worry about? But when she started inviting Haman, they began to question, is she friends with Haman? Does this mean that we can't rely on her? That was part of her kavana. And that is the lesson in the Shichrurei Avodim. You can have your avodim, you can hire people, use people, treat them right, but you should know ultimately you don't own them forever. 168 years ago, a great tzaddik by the name of Rabbi Ram Daiz Auerbach, the Rav of Uvritz, the Mechaber of the Sefer Avi Nachal, picked himself up and his entire family, and with great Mesiras Nefesh made his way to Eretz Yisrael and settled in Tzfas. One of the things that motivated him to go was that a Meshulach had once come to his town. This particular Meshulach was a great tzaddik, a Makobel, and he told the Avi Nachal that in Eretz Yisrael, the soil is full of diamonds. He meant it al pi Kabbalah, he meant it in terms of Kedushas Eretz Yisrael, but the Avi Nachal felt a certain attraction to that, and he was determined to go. When he came to Tzfas, he was disappointed. He said, I don't see the diamonds. He did not expect to see physical diamonds, but he felt that he didn't see the Ruchnistika diamonds either, in as much as the Meshulach had described it. So he locked himself up in a Beis HaMedrash, and he cried his heart out for many, many days. He was Isaac in Torah and Avodah. And one day, to the surprise of everyone, he came out beaming with a smile from ear to ear. He looked down at the ground and he said, now I see it. The brachas of Eretz Yisrael come only after a person separates himself from thinking solely about this world and relying on this world. And it's not something that can be taken for granted. It requires avodah. It requires a thorough understanding and living up to the mitzvahs of Parshas Bahar. It's interesting, the Avi Nachal was makpid once he came to Tzfas never to eat from peiros that came from anywhere else but homegrown. He would only eat peiros Eretz Yisrael. And even during difficult hunger years, he refused to eat bread that was made with flour that came from Chutz La'aretz. He said, the Torah promises, I will command the 6th year to provide for the Shemitah year. That means that the true bracha of Eretz Yisrael is to somehow find it within Eretz Yisrael. Why doesn't the Torah say just import on a Shemitah year? So it must be that if you have the proper Mesiras Nefesh for Kedushas Eretz Yisrael, it's not a viable option to import. You can find the bracha within the land. And indeed, he did. But perhaps understanding the Avi Nachal's approach to Eretz Yisrael gives us also an insight into the beginning of our Sedra. Many ask the kasha. The pasuk begins, Ki Savoyu la'aretz Ashani noisim lachem, V'shavsa aretz Shabbos l'Shem. So the Torah introduces us to the mitzvah of Shemitah. Then the pasuk says, Sheish shanim tizra sedecha, v'sheish shanim tizra kamecha, v'yasaftes tuasa. And afterwards, we go back to Shemitah, b'shana shviyah Shabbos Shabbos, and Yelaret Shabbos l'Shem. So the Torah begins by describing the mitzvah of Shemitah, then talks about working for 6 years, and back to Shemitah. Why don't we begin by saying you work for 6 years, and then we go to Shemitah? Why do we start with Shemitah first? The Torah says perhaps this is what Eretz Yisrael is. The Torah is describing what happens. Ki Savoyu la'aretz. In your mind, you have to know that there are diamonds over here. This is a Moedik Gan Eden. Just sit back and dwell in Ruchnius. Know that as a fact, the Shavsa are at Shabbos l'Shem. After you know that there are diamonds over here, by the same token, understand you're not going to see them as soon as you come. You cannot take them for granted. If you're not ready to separate yourself from laying into Olam Haza, then you're going to land in Eretz Yisrael and you're going to see the same grass that you see in Switzerland. So therefore the pasuk says, Sheish shanim tizra sedecha, v'sheish shanim tizma kamecha. You have to learn how to work in Eretz Yisrael. You have to learn how to fulfill all of the mitzvahs throughout the Shemitah cycle, the maisros, the trumais, the halachis of leket, shikra, and peya. You have to work on yourself. Mesiras Nefesh for others. And then, then you will see the diamonds. Then you will be zoicha to understand what the mitzvah of Shemitah is. But don't think it's going to come easy, and don't think it won't come without nisyonis. In the end, if you have kematis mahalach in the Sefer Torah L'Miyadim from the Zeb and the Chen Levracha, he says that there is a fundamental difference between Chutz La'aretz and Eretz Yisrael. In Chutz La'aretz, you can also be mekadosh the land through kiyum hamitzvahs. You build a Beis Medrash, you learn there, you daven there, it becomes a Migdash Ma'at. You build a house that represents Kiddusha, and you raise a family, a Torah family in that house, and you screen it from alien forces that try to rip away our children from the Kiddusha of Torah, then you have also created a Migdash Ma'at. So Chutz La'aretz has the potential of Kiddusha if you invest the mitzvahs into it. But if there aren't going to be mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz, then it remains Chutz La'aretz. No Kedusha there whatsoever. Eretz Yisrael is different. In Eretz Yisrael, we tell you that every Dalet Anos of Eretz Yisrael has diamonds over here. It has mitzvahs over here that are waiting to be pulled out. It's not that you create the Kedusha through your mitzvahs. The Kedusha is there. It's an inherent part of Eretz Yisrael. It's in the DNA of the land. You will be zeicha to see it, to bring it out in the open by performing the mitzvah. And that's the message that the Torah is giving us. You should know, Kisavayu Laretz, right away, before you do a thing, understand the treasure that you're standing on. V'shavsa or Shabbos Lashem, Eretz Yisrael cries Shemitah. Eretz Yisrael cries Menuchas Nefesh. It cries Shabbos. It cries Kiddusha and Tahara. Now that you know that, bring it out. Perform all of the mitzvahs, so you should be zeicha to perceive it, you should be zeicha to feel it. Because unfortunately, you can live in Eretz Yisrael for many generations and not realize that you're standing on the diamonds. May the Rebbeinu Shalom have that we should be zeicha to taste the diamonds of Eretz Yisrael, to taste the Kedusha of Shabbos, at least once, so we should be motivated to work on it ourselves and to feel it in our own right. If someone owed you $1,000, would you rather get a $1,000 check or 1,000 single dollar bills? Now, both of them may amount to the same. However, 1,000 single dollar bills is a little bit difficult to manage. It's hard to carry home. It's hard to distribute. It's hard to keep records of. $1,000 check can be a lot simpler. So is someone upset when he gets 1,000 single dollar bills? It all depends. If I wasn't expecting anything and someone brought me 1,000 single dollar bills, I'd be very happy. If someone owed me $1,000 and I was expecting it, and instead of getting a check, he brought me 1,000 single dollar bills, I would be quite dismayed. If a Yid adheres to the halachos of Shemitah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises him, you are going to be taken care of. You will not lose out because of the halachos of Shemitah. I, Baruch Hashem, this year had the opportunity to make an appeal for the Keren HaShviyas, and a member of the organization related to me a fascinating story. There was a young man coming closer to Yiddishkeit who was makabel upon himself to close down his field for an entire year. It's a Mesiras Nefesh that's mind-boggling. There can only be one Klal Yisrael that has this level of amun. And he went through the entire year. He held out. Those that guard the laws of Shemitah. It's not just a one-day Nisayin. It's a Nisayin from one year to the next. Once the time came that he was allowed to plant, so he ran off to the local office that distributes the seeds, the government office, to see what he can still hop around for that season. And he was told that there are no seeds left. He missed the deadline. He didn't take what was allotted to him, and now there's nothing to plant. He was very devastated by this. He was very hurt. So he went back to the local Rabbanim that guided him, and he sort of had a taina, where is the halacha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will always pay you back for Shemitah? So these Rabbanim went to a big place. They said, what should we answer him? So the Pasuk said, let him go back to the government office and ask if there are any seeds left. So he went back to the government office. They told him that there's a seed for a certain kind of a celery. That's the only thing that's left. A vegetable that is not commonly used. It's used for some type of a spice in soup. So this big Pasuk said, if that's what's left, tell him to plant that. So he went and he took all of these seeds and he cultivated his fields and he planted them, and his wife said to him, unless there's going to be a terrible frost next year, and every single mother in all of Eretz Yisrael is going to make soup all day, I don't see what you're going to do with all of this. But he still had his amun of chacham, and he went full force ahead. It turned out that there's one European country that's very big into this particular spice, used a lot over there, and for whatever reason their crop was completely destroyed, and they were going from country to country asking who has this. And diplomats from that country came to Eretz Yisrael amongst other nations and said, is there anybody that has enough of this kind of spice? So they looked up on the records and there's one farmer that took it. So they went and they found our friend. And these European diplomats came to him along with local negotiators. And they said to him, can you provide us with this and this amount? And that's exactly the amount that he had, a tremendous amount. And they offered him a huge price for it. He was so shocked, he said, what? So they thought it wasn't enough, so they offered him even more. And the person, Mamish, became a Gazir Adir from this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised, you adhere to the laws of Shemitah, I'll take care of you. But, the Eliyahu Lapian explains the Sefer Lev Eliyahu, if someone owes you something, even when he pays you, there is a difference between being paid in the qualitative way or in the quantitative way. Getting a little of something that's really good and special is a bracha on its own. A lot of the little things means, I promised I'm giving it to you, but I can pay you in any way that I want. So while we have a guarantee that by listening to the laws of Shemitah we're going to be paid, but we have no guarantee how we're going to be paid. So what then determines whether we're going to be paid in an easy way or we're going to get the fulfillment of our promise in a more difficult way? Dr. Lev Eliyahu, that depends on your level of bitachon. Let's listen to the pasuk. The Torah says, if you abide by the laws of Shemitah, that's a guarantee. You're going to get back your pay. You won't lose. However, here's the catch. Normally, you're going to get your bracha in the form of Pashas Bahar, Kapitel Chafei, Pasuk Yotes, in the form of Yachaltem L'Soiva. You're going to eat, you're going to be full. But Rashi, what is this bracha of Yachaltem L'Soiva? Af b'toich hame'ayim tehei by bracha. Though you may eat only a little, even within the intestines you'll feel the blessings. You'll eat a little bit and you will feel satiated, you will feel full, you will feel relaxed, you will feel happy, you will feel a sense of, I have, Baruch Hashem, what I need. Even though you only ate a little. But the food will have such bracha in it, such quality in it, that it will only take a little to make you feel full. Imagine a person's on a diet and he's told you can only eat 3 ounces of cottage cheese. So he eats the 3 ounces of cottage cheese and then what? Remember years ago I brought an elderly yid to a doctor. The doctor told me he has to go on a diet and he gave him a whole list of food that he can eat. 3 ounces of cottage cheese, 3 slices of bread, whatever it was. And the yid wrote everything down and he said, Git a bedakta vus esach. In other words, I'll take all of this. But what do I eat afterwards? The problem with the diet is not what he's eating, it's what you're not letting him eat. But imagine the person eats the 3 ounces of cottage cheese and there's a magical wand and he feels like he ate a 3-course meal. He mamish feels like he is ready to lay down and go to sleep and relax. Such a sense of fulfillment and happiness. That's the bracha the Torah promises. In addition, the Yeshaftem Levet HaChalel, like Rashi, Shalai Tidagu Mishnas B'Tzayros, you won't have to fear a year of drought. Not only will you be full today, you won't even have to worry about tomorrow. You're going to be satiated, you're going to be confident, you're going to be relaxed. That's one pchina. That's if a person really does everything right and he asks no questions. Then in Pasuk Chav, the Pasuk goes on like this. Suppose someone's going to say, I'm going to listen to the laws of Shemitah. What shall we eat in the 7th year? We didn't sow, we didn't gather in us to our tfuah. What's going to be? The pasuk says, you're panicking, you're desperate. Don't worry. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will command a special bracha, and what you plant in the 6th year is going to be enough for the 6th year, for the 7th year that you're not planting, and for the 8th year, because even if you start planting in the 8th year, you're not going to have it yet till the next year. And the pasuk promises, as a ratim, as a shana hashminis, you will plant in the 8th year, and don't worry. You just go ahead and continue on after Shemitah. V'yachaltem min hatfuah yashan, you will eat from the old tfuah ad hashana chias until the 9th year. Advait fuasa, until the new tfuah is ready. Teichul yashan, you will have enough of the old. You will continue eating from the old one. Rashi points out sometimes you even have Shemitah followed by Yovel, so there's even another year. So you would have to have the 6th year providing for 4 years. Dr. Velulapian, he bases this on a Sapurna, and there's a similar vote from the Rebbe of Zisha. But it's so clear in the Psukim, it mamish jumps out at you. The pasuk is talking about 2 different things over here. Number 1, a person who doesn't ask questions. The Baruch Hashem, you want me to do it? Fine. I'm not asking any questions. If this is what you want me to do, if this is the Ratzon Hashem, I should stop working. I need no guarantees. I need no promises. I need no contracts. That's all. I stop working. For this person, life is going to be very happy and very simple. You'll eat. You're going to be full. You will have a lot. You won't have a lot. You won't even be bothered with the counting of it. You're going to know only one thing. You are going to feel content. You will be comfortable. You will be gratified. No daigas. And more important than you're going to have enough and feel full, you're not going to worry. You're not going to live in a massive bahar. Then you have somebody who wants to be technical. This person comes and says, Rabbeinu Shalom, this is my budget. This is my projected profit for the quarter. And you're telling me not to invest? You're telling me not to work? Look at my computer. It doesn't make sense. How do I balance this? Okay, this is a very different kind of a person. He gets credit. He's still adhering to the laws of Shemitah. So we're saying, you want it to make sense? It'll make sense. It's a says, Berchasi, you will have so much that you're going to have enough. You won't lose out. But you're already talking about a massive quantity over here. The pasuk is stressing. You're going to have it. But what you won't have is that simple peacefulness of the first way of getting it. Because you're screaming and yelling, no, what's going to be? What's going to be? Here, it's going to be. Look at your books, it's going to be full. The 6 years is going to produce such a massive profit that it's going to carry you over. By the time the 9th year comes around, you will balance your sheets. But you're going to have to organize all of this. You may have 1,000 single dollar bills. It's up to 1,000, but it's difficult to manage. You're going to have to figure out how to distribute it, how to control it, how to manage it. But this already is up to you. And of course, because it's going to take you much more time, because you'll have so much to manage, it's going to cause bittul tayr. Whereas the first way was really a lot more misfugel, should we say, for lower blood pressure. Dr. Value-Apian, this is not just true for Shemitah year. This is true, quote, b'chol yaim v'yaim, every single day in a person's life, or b'chol adam, and for every person. V'oisa midah she'adam b'teach b'Hashem. It's not just having bitachon in Hashem, but in the manner that you have bitachon in Hashem, came HaKadosh Baruch Hu misnahig ilay. That is how HaKadosh Baruch Hu conducts himself with him. Ka'kasiv, like the pasuk says, Hashem silcha al yad yaminecha. Silcha, from the lashon of tzeil, a shadow. If you lift one hand or one finger, that's what the shadow will do. If you lift two fingers, you will see two fingers in the shadow. Your level of bitachon is directly responsible for the manner of your ritzonais being fulfilled. The Vilna Gaon says that the first 6 letters of the Torah, Beis, Reish, Aleph, Shin, Yud, Saf, represent the 6 yisodos that a Yid needs to survive, to be a Yid. Beis is bitachon. The Reish is ratzon. The Aleph is ahava. The Shin stands for shtika, the ability to remain silent. Yud is yira, fear, and the Taf is Torah. I've been seeing Yabba B'Chaim Levracha in the Akdama to the Sefer Tov Yerushalayim explains how all of these are connected. First, you have to understand that without bitachon we have nothing. We have no security. When you have bitachon, bitachon has to be followed up by ratzon, by a will to want to fulfill the ratzon of Hashem. Even if that means being mevatel your own personal will. And when you are mevatel your own personal will and you make that investment, then you are zaycha to the next thing. The Aleph, the Ahavas Hashem, to love Hashem. That love, Chas Hashem, could possibly be tested. And therefore, you have the Shin, the Shtika. Real love has to stand up to the test of difficult times. If you have the ability of remaining silent, of a Yid and Aharon, and things aren't going your way, then the Ahava is cemented. Then that is a sign that it is real Ahava. And from there you are Zaycha to Yiras Hashem, that's the Yud. He's referring probably to the higher madregas of Yiras Hashem, not just Yiras Einish, because Yiras Einish comes before Ahava. And then you can truly acquire the Taf, the Torah. But bitachon is the conduit. Bitachon is the faucet. It's the pipe that brings all of this Ahava, Yira, and relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu towards you. You can have the best wine in the world, But if you don't have a way of getting it out of the barrel, if the pipe isn't big enough, then your access to it is going to be limited. The betachin is the conduit. The betachin is the means of acquiring every other madrega. And the Rebbe Zisha says that's really pshat on the pasuk. Betachin creates the tziner of hashpah. You have betachin, the faucet is open, the hashpahs are coming down from Shemayim. When a person falls off his madrega and he loses his betachin, and he is suddenly frightened and frustrated, so the hashpah of parnasa or bracha physically stops. But that's life. In life there are yeridas and aliyahs. And a yid knows after you yerida, what do? You open up a chayvus avavis and you begin to work on your betachin until it comes back. When your betachin comes back, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to reconnect the line. So the Rebbe Zisha says, this is how it's explained in the Sefer Torah Savos, if everything goes okay, so there's no problem. As long as you have your betachin, the tziner of parnasa is open, you get what you need. But it happens sometimes. There are yeridas and aliyahs in life that a person loses his betachin. So you should know that if you're going to start panicking about what's going to be, and then the automatic result is that the parnasa is cut off. So again, don't panic. HaKadosh Baruch Hu can reconnect it. Even though because of your question it was lost, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu can say, okay, I'll give you a new hashpah of parnasa. If it's Savisi Brachas Yilachem, I will command that it should come again anew. Just open up the chayvus avavis and get back your betachin. The Brisker Rav had a naden, and that was supposed to support him for 10 years after he got married. And he gave it over to someone to invest, and that person let him know a month later that the money was history. The Brisker Rav was very shocked. He went into a room with the chayvus avavis and he spent some time over there. When he came out, he said that I lost my naden, but I gained betachin. It was very good that I made this exchange. I'm a far better person as a result of it. And I'm much more ready to deal with life. So in other words, it's normal to fall. But rather you didn't. But if you did, don't give up. Then work yourself back and you'll get a new hischatshus of parnasa. Everyone knows the famous story in Karmiyas, which basically was the first yishuv, probably since the times of the Churban, that had the opportunity of being Mekayim the halachos of Shemitah. And they did so with great mysterious nefesh. It was during war years when food was being rationed. And everyone knows the story. There was a locust attack that wiped out all of the crop in the entire area, and they did not step into Kaimanias. But a Yitchim Kaimanias once added another nakuda to the story, which is not as well known. There was one field in Kaimanias that the locusts came into. They didn't do any damage or serious damage, but they did come into. They didn't step into the rest of Kaimanias, which was a tremendous mess. But he told me he was interested to find out why did the locusts come into that person's field, even though they didn't do any damage. And he pursued the person and he said to him, tell me the truth. Did you manage to follow all of the instructions exactly that our Rav Binyamin Mendelssohn told us and instructed us? So the person finally admitted to him that he had a water sprinkler which he automatically set to go on at like 2 o'clock in the morning and go off at 5 o'clock in the morning. He didn't want anyone else to see it. And this was the one field in Kaimanias that the locusts came into. They didn't do any damage, but they came into the field. So in other words, Lamaisa, generally he held the halachos of Shemitah. He didn't plant, but there was a mashu of the tachain that he was missing as opposed to the other members of Kaimanias. And the level of the nest also corresponded to that. The tachain was a drop less. The miracle by him was a drop less. May we all be zecher to the Kolabateach Hashem Chesed Yisrael. They say that somebody once told the Noida B'Yehuda, I would love to have more time to learn, but people are always knocking at my door asking for things. Or the rich and poor alike have requests from me, and I'm always being distracted. So the Noida B'Yehuda told him in jest, I have a solution for you. It'll keep both the rich and the poor away. When the rich come to you, ask them that they should lend you money. You won't see them again. When the poor come to you, lend them money, and you also won't see them again. As a result, you'll have plenty of time to learn. There's a fascinating medrash in this week's parsha on the pasuk of L'chiyamach achicha imach. For those who are learning Daf Yomi, you may be familiar with in almost identical chazal that appears at the beginning of the Masechtas Bava Basra. But before we get to that, a small hakdama. Chazal tell us, Eved loiva leish malva. One who borrows money is in a situation where he's a kind of a slave to the one who lent him the money. Now, of course, both borrower and lender have to adhere to the Torah guidelines. The malva, the lender, who has performed a great mitzvah, if not the greatest level of tzedakah, by lending someone money, is obligated to make sure that the person is comfortable. He should not overpressure him. Of course, he's not permitted to charge interest, as the Psukim explained to us in this week's Sedra. Like should not overpressure him. If you know that the loiva is doing his best, but he simply doesn't have the money, there's a limit to how much you push that person. In certain situations, you aren't even permitted to walk down the same street as someone who owes you money, lest he meet you and feel uncomfortable or strained. The loiva, for his part, has to pay back the loan. And if he is negligent in doing so, or he simply has his priorities and paying back loans is not very high on that list, then he is one of the few people who are categorized as a Rasha. Lo v'Rasha v'lo yishalem. But even in the best of the situations, even when the malva adheres to the words of Chazal and does everything right and goes according to halacha, and the loiva does his best, the relationship could possibly be strained. And if they're very smart and delicate and diplomatic, it'll never come out in the open. But Chazal say we have to face the reality. The reality is Eved loiva leish malva. Now, there are various levels of avdus. There are various different degrees of slavery. The Torah in this etc. teaches us how you have to handle a slave. You're not allowed to do things openly that displays this person as a slave. Don't command him to carry your clothes behind you to the wash house. Don't tell him to tie your shoes. Treat him like a worker. Take care of his family. You can't make him work extra hard. That means a malacha that is not necessary. Some people do that. They just make their eved work, not because they need the work, but because, listen, I'm the boss and he's the eved. So if he doesn't work for me, I'm not capitalizing on this relationship. So therefore, pile up these stones over there, even though there's no need for that. That's a lav in the Torah. Included in that lav is to tell someone to work without giving him an amount or saying, listen, you'll have your break after you accomplish this much, or this is what I want you to do, and at this hour you can stop for a few moments, and the person has to work indefinitely. That is considered bifarach, that is considered an inhumane level of avdus. If we know what our mission is, and there's an end to it that gives us cheshek, that gives us an ability to be able to endure it. Tell children at the beginning of the day, today there was no recess. You're not going to have a very productive day in learning. It's interesting, the Rabbeinu Yoina, the Shari Tshuva, said, Leisir Debay Befarach is a general directive to everyone. Don't ask another yid to do you a favor if it's not really necessary for you to have that favor. Some people like to do that. You like to ask favors and you don't really need it. It just feels good that someone's doing something for you. If it's not necessary, it could be in violation of this law, says the Rabbeinu Yoina. You know that all the years that I remember of Palm Zecher Tzadik Levracha in the Dismedish in Tervitas, I don't recall once that he ever asked a bahar to bring him a favor. He would always get up and go to the farm shank and somehow manage to find it himself. That doesn't necessarily apply to every one of us. Everyone has their own derech, and there are different lessons and different hanhagais, but it's something to think about. So, and indeed the pasuk concludes, Leisirda by Befara, the Yereisa Melekacha. Because if I tell my Eved to go out and work on the field, work in the orchard, or warm me up a cup, sometimes no one else will ever know whether I really needed that or I just did it for the sake of I feel good to issue a command. It's like second nature to me. Only the Rebbeinu Shalom knows that. For an onlooker, he may as well say, oh, he probably needs the hot water, or he needs that person to pile the stones up in a certain area. So the Rebbeinu Shalom says that I know when you order someone to do it, whether it's beneficial, whether it's for the purpose, or whether you're just doing this to show your power. Whenever you have a mitzvah that not everyone can tell what your intent is, so the pasuk reminds us the Yeresa Melikecha, Lesidaba Befarach, the Yeresa Melikecha, Fear Hashem. The Rebbeinu Shem knows what's in your heart. The Rebbeinu Shem knows why you're making a request. But when you have this kind of a mitzvah, where only the Rebbeinu Shem knows whether the request is legitimate or not, so that the Yeresa Melikecha goes twofold. It's a warning. Don't think you're fooling the Rebbeinu Shalom. And it's also a vehicle of Yiras Shamayim. If I'm about to issue an order, and I say, I don't really need this. I'm just doing it to show my bias, and the Rebbeinu Shem knows that, and therefore you hold yourself back, so you have now instilled Yiras Shamayim into your heart. So when you have these kinds of psukim, like Sirda by Befarach, Yeresa Melikecha, by fulfilling the like Sirda by Befarach, you have injected into your mitzias, you have absorbed into your essence the Yeresa Melikecha Yiras Shamayim. When a person is faced with an assignment where it's only between you and the Rebbeinu Shalom, and you think no one else will know, that is a opportunity for either losing Yiras Shamayim or gaining Yiras Shamayim. In any event, getting back to what we started with. So, Eved Loiva Liyesh Malva. The fact is, you owe someone money, you're an Eved. There are different kinds of Avadim. There are Avadim that suffer, there are Avadim that don't suffer at all, as much. But an Eved is an Eved whether you like it or not. Even if you have the best of masters. Still, there is a way for us to capitalize on this union of Eved Loiva Liyesh Malva. There is a way for us to benefit from this idea that an Eved will always be a loiva to the malva in such a way that it's not malicious, it's not sadistic, and it's an unbelievable opportunity for treasure. On this pasuk of the Chiyamach Achicha Imach, the Medrash says, Ilamale Mikra Kasif, were this not a beferish pasuk, you would not even be allowed to repeat this. What is this that I would not be allowed to repeat? Zok the Medrash, as well as the Gemara in Bava Basra, Kaviyachor, Darkoi Shaloiva Liois Eved Lemalva. When you perform the mitzvah of tzedakah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you have paid up my responsibility, because I am obligated to support the world. And therefore I now owe you money. So in a sense, this person who gave tzedakah is the malva, and again, as the Medrash says, where it's not that the pasuk says this, you would not even be permitted to repeat this, but this is how the Medrash understands the pasuk. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I am the loiva and you're the malva. You stepped in and you provided for one of my children who was in need, and as a result, I owe you the money now. Because I am obligated to support the world. And therefore, the relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the giver of the tzedakah is that of a loiva and malva. Kaviyachol HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the loiva, and the person who gave the tzedakah is the malva. And here too we apply the concept of Eved Loiva Leish Malva. Hashem says, I owe you. The Medrash and the Gemara dash in the pasuk in Mishlei that says, Malva Hashem Chaynein Dao. The Rebbeinu Shem says, yes, you give it to that ani, and I will consider it as if you lent the money to me. The Beis Halevi, in the Kuntras HaTzedakah, explains this quite simply. Every Rosh Hashanah it is written down exactly how much every single person is going to earn. And when the final is tallied up, you will not have a penny more or a penny less. It makes no difference if he is the richest person on the world, counting his billions, or he is the poorest person on the world, counting his pennies. Whatever he's going to make was established on Rosh Hashanah, with the exception, of course, of Eitzah, Shabbosis, V'Yom Tovim, Chinuch Havanim, and so on. There's the old joke that this Rothschild would have been a Mohammed had he been a Rebbe in a yeshiva, he would have been even more rich, because he would have had all of his vast billions from his enterprises, plus the schools, plus his wages. The only problem with that is, had he been a proper Rebbe and taken off the proper time to prepare, he wouldn't have had all that much time to think about his enterprise. But let's leave Rothschild alone for a moment. There is a certain reality to this. It doesn't make a difference how rich you are or how poor you are. Whatever. And it doesn't make a difference how you earn your money. The bottom line is, whatever the bottom line was on Rosh Hashanah of the year before. So let's take this ani, who was wandering around and begging for people to help. The Rosh Hashanah before, it has been stated exactly how much he's going to earn, how much he's going to get, and the Rebbeinu Shalom is obligated, kaviyachol, to make sure that that decree is fulfilled, for better or what we perceive to worse. That's the amount that he's going to have. Now, if this ani knocks on your door, or you notice him on the street, and you go over and you offer his help, what you have done is, figuratively speaking, as the Medrash in this week's Sedra explains it, you have carried out what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has committed himself kaviyachol to do. And as a result, HaKadosh Baruch Hu now owes you. To the point where HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers himself, and again, we don't know what these words mean, but the Medrash says it and the Gemara says it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers himself an eved. Now, let's try to shed a little bit light on this. Imagine two people meet, Mechel and Shloima. Mechel says to Shloima, Shloima, I haven't seen you in ages. What do you do, Shloima? Shloima says, I'm a plumber. Really, who do you work for? He says, I work for myself. But most of my work I do for Mr. So-and-so. He has apartment houses. He has buildings. And basically I work for him from morning until night. If there are emergencies, I go running over to him. Nu, tell me, Mechel, what do you do? Asks Shloima. So Mechel says, I struck in hard times. I'm an Eved. Had no bread to sell myself to an Eved Ivri. Nu, how's your Balabas treating you? My Balabas? Baruch Hashem, he's an Erlich Yid. He's Mekayim the Pasuk of Leisirda by the Farach, Yiresim Alekecha. He knows I'm good at plumbing, and he sends me to do his plumbing work only when he needs it. Treats me very, very well, gives me my breaks. Of course, when he needs me, I'm there. I'm always there to work for him. And he provides for me, for my family, for my children. He's kind to me, he's nice to me, never looks down at me. I never feel diminished in his presence. My Balabas is an Erlich Yid. No, Shloima, but I wish I was like you. I wish I wasn't an Eved. And Shloima says, may the Rebbeinu Shalom help. Look, you're going to come at the end of 6 years. Don't worry, you won't be an Eved forever. Now let's stop for a moment and think about this. How come Shloima is so happy and Mechel's krechzi and Mechel's saying? They're both doing the same thing? Well, I wouldn't even be surprised if you take into account the one who owns the Eved over here, how much he is paying for his Eved in terms of supporting him and his family and making sure that he isn't hurt. I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't spending as much money as Shloma's boss is, or Shloma's customer rather is, when he orders Shloma. And they both may be doing the same amount of work. So how come it's a Rachmanas on one who's an Eved, and the other one is other people look up to him, he's a successful businessman. They're both doing the same thing, and it could even be that in dollars and cents, if you figure out benefits from goods and services, there's not even that much of a difference in terms of what they're making. So at the end of the day, explain to me, what is the difference between Mechel and Shloima? And the answer is one simple difference. Shloima can wake up on every given morning and say, today I'm not going to fix any pipes. Shloima can wake up on every given morning and say, today I decided I'm no longer a plumber. Today I want to be a carpenter. Or better yet, today I want to sit in the Beis HaMikdash. And Mechel does not have that option. Shloima may have this person who owns apartment houses, and he is the greatest customer in the world. But in the back of his mind, Shloima knows he can say, he may not want to, but he could say, I don't want to serve you anymore. I'll find someone else. And in the back of his mind, Mechel knows that he can't do that. For the duration of time that he is an Eved, he has to work for this person. He has no other options. To be a little bit more to the point, Shlomo can quit and Mechel can't. And when a person knows he could quit, then sometimes you don't want working, because you own yourself. And when you know you can't quit, even though the person is treating you nicely, you're an Eved. When the Rebbeinu Shalom says, Malva Hashem Choynein Dao, when the Rebbeinu Shalom says, look at this pasuk of Kiyamach Achicha and understand it well. Understand, if you help out your brother who is being oppressed, who is going through difficult times, I am your Eved. What does that mean? It means that unfortunately a Yid can do certain things where he throws off the heavenly protection from himself. Where the Rebbeinu Shalom says, I am no longer committed to you as a result of your chatayim, as a result of your averis. Where the malachim are mekatrik, and they say this person was over such a terrible sin. He is chayiv karis. And as the Ramban explains in Parshas Achrei, karis means his bonds are severed. The spiritual bonds that connect him, connect his heart to emunah, to his neshama. Yet in the schus of the mitzvah of tzedakah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I am your eved. Based on your actions, the heavenly protection, the bonds that you feel, the warmth that you feel, the emunah that is instilled in every Jewish heart should have been taken away from you. It should have been covered up. But I can't do it. You deserve to be thrown off the policy, but I don't have the rights to do it, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu said, because of your tzedakah, I have committed myself to avdos, and an eved can't quit. Suppose the army, says the Medrash, is standing over there, waiting for a piece of bread that costs 10 prutas. All he has is 9. And you give him 1 pruta. You didn't give him 1 pruta, you gave him the ability to buy a piece of bread. You didn't just give him the ability to buy a piece of bread, you gave him life. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu concludes the Medrash. This is the same piece of Medrash on the Pasuk of Chiyamach Achicha about the Malva. Af ata, the same is true for you. If the nefesh of a person is about to leave mitach gufach from your body, chas v'shalom, the Rebbeinu Shem says, Ani mashiv, I will return it to you. Lafikach Moshe Mazil Yisrael, therefore Moshe warns Klal Yisrael, as repeated so many times in our Sedra, V'chiyamach achicha, when your brother is oppressed, step in. I was once sitting in someone's office and he got a call from a mortgage broker that said, now, given your application now, I can lock in the rate. And the man said, I don't have time, I have to wait. He said, you don't understand, if you lock in the rate now, they can't raise you. This is the Lafikach Moshe Mazil Yisrael. If there is a chiyamach achicha and you step in, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says you are locked in, but you can't wait. You have to be at the right place at the right time to perform the vehechazakta by, because only then are you entitled to a policy that can't be cancelled.
This shiur is distributed by Koladas, 11 Stei Chenet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383-999. Fax 02-538-0267. Postbox 57035.